Jess Kelly's Christmas gaming gift guide in partnership with Virgin Media, bringing your A game with 99.9% broadband reliability. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning, how are we?
Newstalk's technology correspondent, of course. This week we are looking at PS5 and Xbox. So what are the differences? What should people be going for?
Well, I think, as we talked about briefly last week, there are gamers who found their ecosystem and they're never going to move from that ecosystem. So if they're a PS gamer, or if there's or PC gamer, or if they're a Switch user, or if they're Xbox or PlayStation, they're never going to move. So this segment is not for you. Keep watching. You can judge me in the comments. There's no issue with that, but this is not for you. This is for everyone else who is either contemplating what console to get for themselves or a loved one, or maybe there are conversations about what console Santa should bring in the house. I know one of your OTB colleagues was on to me yesterday about this very issue, so I thought it was good to kind of talk through the differences, because not only are there PlayStation and Xbox consoles, there's also variations of the PlayStation and the Xbox consoles. So for those who don't know, there's the PS5, so the PlayStation 5, and then the PS5 Digital Edition. Shane, you may remember last week we were talking a little bit about how gaming has changed. So it's not really, just about going to the store and buying a physical copy anymore. You can now download a whole host of games. The Xbox Pass that we mentioned last week, you can kind of download and stream games to a certain extent as well. So they brought out the digital edition to try and bring the cost down. And the key difference between it and the flagship PS5 is that there's no disc drive. I don't know, would that matter to you if you didn't have the disc drive?
So is this, you wouldn't have the console itself?
No, you'd have the console, but you wouldn't be putting discs in. You'd just be downloading the games.
This is like the people who like reading books and like reading ebooks. Like, do you want
100%? Yeah, that's it.
I 100% would want the physical copy.
Would you?
Yeah, big time. Just to see the cover and the retroness and pass it on to my kids.
I'm not a gamer whatsoever, Jess. Now I'm illiterate when it comes to this, so I'm learning a lot here.
Okay, but let's talk about it in the way that I talk about it. So my boyfriend is a big gamer, and I wanted to get the digital editions just because it would mean we would have less games everywhere in the apartment.
Right.
Yes, less clutter.
Less clutter. I'm all about the less clutter. Now, the only thing is, and it's a good thing this is a Virgin Media thing, is that you need good broadband to have the digital games.
Yeah.
You need to have a high-powered connection, because there is nothing worse than getting the digital version of a console and then spending 48 hours trying to download a game on dial-up speed. It is beyond painful. But in terms of the internal spec, there's not a massive difference between the flagship and the digital edition. I think the digital edition would do the job for the majority of people.
Right.
There will be people like you, Shane, who will want the physical copies of things.
You're talking about clutter, but I mean, you know the way people have bookshelves and they mightn't even touch the books, but it just looks good.
It looks good. I was going to say it actually looks good with the games.
I like the games, the colour.
Maybe 10, but when you get to 75 games and you're trying to hang your laundry out the window because there's no space in the house, that's when you get into problem territory, The other thing to note though as well, the downside to the digital edition, and again I'm a fan of the digital edition, is that, say if you were playing a game, Shane, and you just finished it and we wanted to do a game swap or whatever, you can't do that with the digital downloads.
That's true.
It's associated with your account.
Yeah.
So that is something to be mindful of. But, I mean, it's coming with a hell of a lot of storage. The downside, as I said, is that you're not having the disc drive, which does double up as a Blu-ray player. So if you're still somebody like me in their mid-70s who watches DVDs, it could be beneficial to have that. The other thing that I would say is that they increased the price of the PlayStation not so long ago, which is a pain in the face. So the flagship edition, so the PS5 with the disc drive, went up from $499.99 to $549.99. So that's a significant, that's a 50 quid jump.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
For the same console, if you manage to get your hands on one. Shane, do you have a PS5?
My brother has a PS5. It's always been a PS house as opposed to Xbox.
Okay, controversial, but okay.
I know that's controversial and there's a lot of rivalry there.
Yeah.
The only thing that strikes me with this is, so the digital version is cheaper, but you need to buy storage, a hell of a lot of storage.
Well, no, it comes with a good bit of storage
Right.
on the device built in, but obviously that is capped. So, the good thing about the digital games is that you can, it's kind of like having apps on your phone, so you can have the full version or you can offload it so that the template of the game is there, but if you wanted to go in and play it, you'd have to re-download it again. So you can have your cloud-based library and then you can have your on-device library. Again, internet connectivity is super important here. But But I do think the digital edition would tick the box for most people. Getting your hands on a PS5 has been one of the biggest, most controversial stories I've covered in my 10 years as a journalist.
Is it still as bad this Christmas as it ever was?
It's not as bad, but it's still bad, right? And people who are wondering why, it's a very good question. I could replay Tech Talk from this time 2 years ago talking about PS5 shortages, and a lot of it would still stand. So there were issues with the supply chain from the outset. The demand was unprecedented. This was the first PlayStation console in many, many, many years. The hype was there. They'd done a lot of build up to it, and they just couldn't fulfill the demand. Then obviously this little thing called COVID happened. There was also the semiconductor shortage, which is something that's not just impacting tech, like it's impacting, consoles, laptops, but also cars. Like these conductors are in everything now. So that delayed the production even more. Interestingly, last week, the head of Sony PlayStation said that they have finally resolved the issues. And while you may think, okay, that's going to help Santa out a lot, he's saying it'll solve the issue by Q1 of 2023. So I've had a look around the Irish retailers this morning, and very, very few of them have the PS5 in stock. But there's a Twitter account that's worth following if you are on the hunt, or if you want to just give Santa a nudge and maybe give him the heads up on this as well. It's at PS5_Ireland. I'll tweet it out and get the OTB account to retweet it as well. But basically, they repost updates if they hear a store is getting stock. So, if they hear that a GameStop somewhere in Cork is going to get stock, they will push it out. What I would say is, if you get the notification that there is one in stock, or if you happen into a store and stumble upon one, don't be like, oh, I'll come back in an hour, I'll get the rest of the shopping first, because these things will fly out the door. So if you get your hands on one, I would just snap it up as quickly as possible. I forgot to mention actually the price for the digital edition.
Yeah.
So it went up as well from $399.99 to $499.99. So, $449.
So 50 quid rise
50
again,
quid up, but it's still significantly cheaper. It's still 100 quid cheaper than the main edition. So look, the options are there. I think there are gamers who will just want the flagship device because it is all singing, all dancing. I remember the day setting up our PS5 at home, and there's like a demo game that comes on it. It's like Astro's World or Astro something. It's this little robot, looks like Wall-E, and the graphics are incredible. The controller, you can see how much they put into the controller in terms of the feedback you get, in terms of the sound that comes from the controller. Like, if you get one, you will absolutely love it. But the key thing is getting your paws on one.
I didn't think I'd feel so strongly about this, but now that you bring it up, I'm like 100% you need the physical games.
Really?
Like maybe it's the old man in my body.
You're 12.
Yeah. I like the swapping aspect because it is expensive to buy them.
With your mates, of course.
Yeah, I do always remember that. I'm not a big gamer, as I said, but I always do remember people swapping.
Yeah.
Because they're pricey.
Yeah.
They're so pricey still. Like, it can be 90 quid, anywhere from 60 to 90 quid for a title.
That sets you back.
Two versions of the Xbox as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there are. So there's the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series X. Now, there are a few more differences between the two consoles, but again, as I said at the top, I would say the majority of gamers would get on just fine with the Series S. So similar enough to the PlayStation lineup, there's the digital-only version, which is the S, and then the X has the 4K Blu-ray player. There's slightly more RAM in the X, so it's slightly more powerful, essentially. You're getting all the bells and whistles in the Series X, and you're making a few compromises along the way with the S. They're subtle enough, though, that I think it would have to be the nerdiest of the nerds that would really notice it. If you are a young gamer, if this is your first console, or if you don't want to spend, half a month's rent on an Xbox, I think the Series S is the way to go. A thing that some gamers do comment on is the resolution and the refresh rate. So the X can go up to 4K at 60 frames per second, and the S is 1440p at 120 frames per second. So that may sound like gobbledygook to most people, right? But if you are a gamer, you'll notice subtle, or you may not, but it's said that you could notice subtle differences in the clarity or maybe a slight lag when you're playing certain titles. I'm a big fan of the Xbox, primarily because anytime I sit down to use any of these consoles, I just play Forza Horizon 4, which is a driving game. I can't drive in real life, but I'm an excellent gaming driver.
That's more important, yeah.
That's literally the only qualification I have in life. But it is great, and again, if you're an Xbox gamer, you will love it. The Xbox Series S is 250 quid and the Xbox Series X is 500 quid.
Right.
So availability is slightly better. I don't want to say they're widely available, but it's definitely slightly better. And we are expecting some big titles to come out for Xbox over the next few months. The other thing to note actually is sort of the backwards compatibility. So say if you were a PS3 or PS4 gamer, and again you had the physical games, you can absolutely play those on your PS5, but if you have the Xbox Series S, which is the digital one, you can't really play your older titles on the new console.
Okay.
So again, it's that digital versus physical debate. For me, I would much rather have the digital editions and compromise slightly on the spec to have a bit of storage space in my house. But I think, look, if you get any of these, you will be delighted with your life.
I'd say your house is so clean when you're talking about storage space and putting things away.
I wish it was, Shane, but no, it's not.
I would say your DMs are absolutely rammed this time of year. That's what I think.
What do I get?
All the questions.
A lot of questions. And if you do have any questions, you can get me on Instagram at Jess Kelly NT and I'll answer as many as humanly possible.
Finally, just both Xbox versions, you can still get the Netflix and Prime Video and stuff as well.
Yes, all those bits are built in. And also the thing that we mentioned last week, you can watch it on YouTube if you missed it. We talked through the Game Pass. This is one of the best gifts you can get a gamer. And I think if you are treating yourself to an Xbox over Christmas, ignore the Netflix and all that kind of stuff. You can watch that at any time. Get onto the Xbox Game Pass and get those hundreds of titles that you can play. It works with both the digital edition and the physical or the traditional edition with the disc drive. So absolutely get on that.
Brilliant. Jess, great stuff as always. Thanks a million this morning.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Jess Kelly there, Newstalk's tech correspondent.